What if the world's most talked about royal baby, the child who was supposed to represent a new era of modern monarchy, wasn't born the way we were told? What if the carefully staged story of Meghan Markle's pregnancy was nothing more than a script, a role, a performance that fooled millions? And what if the truth, buried beneath layers of royal protocol, public relations, and palace secrecy, is only now starting to come to light? That's the chilling question we're diving into today. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because for years, whispers have circulated. Whispers that Meghan never carried Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. Whispers that a surrogate mother was used. Whispers that the palace knew but chose silence. And now, with shocking new claims from Dr. Moda, who insists Meghan was never pregnant, the lid on this tightly sealed scandal may finally be pried open. But before we get to those jaw-dropping revelations, let's rewind to the beginning. Let's look at how the world first fell in love with the fairy tale pregnancy, and why the carefully crafted narrative was always too perfect. The announcement came in October 2018, just months after Meghan and Harry's extravagant royal wedding at Windsor Castle. Do you remember that moment? The glossy photos, Meghan glowing in designer outfits, Harry standing tall and proud beside her. The palace confirmed the news during their tour of Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, and Fiji. The press couldn't get enough. Headlines screamed, "The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are expecting." It was hailed as the beginning of a modern fairy tale. But here's the question. Was it too good to be true? Think about it. Just days after the couple announced the pregnancy, Meghan was photographed attending events in skin-tight dresses, heels, and designer outfits that seemed tailored to show off the tiniest of bumps. The world swooned. Every move she made was photographed, analyzed, celebrated. And yet, behind that celebration, an undercurrent of doubt was already beginning to ripple. Some noticed how quickly the bump appeared. Others remarked on how it seemed to change shape, even size, depending on the day. Have you ever seen photos of Meghan's bump from late 2018? One day, it was small and compact. Another day, it seemed to balloon, pressing against her dress. At times, it even appeared to shift unnaturally when she bent down, crouched, or crossed her legs. The palace called it nonsense, insisting everything was normal. But was it really? Or was this the first crack in the perfect image the world had been fed? That's where curiosity began to turn into suspicion. Because let's be honest, the royal family has always been under scrutiny. Every outfit, every word, every gesture is dissected. And pregnancy? Well, that's not just a private matter when you're a royal. It's a matter of public interest, tradition, and history. Princess Diana, Kate Middleton, even Princess, and every royal mother has been subject to public view. Births are marked with official announcements, photos, and traditions. And yet, with Meghan, so many of those traditions were quietly cast aside. Why? That's the thread we'll be pulling on throughout this exposé. But for now, picture this. Meghan and Harry basking in the glow of public adoration during their royal tour, cameras flashing, reporters swooning. The Duchess, glowing in her maternity dresses, her hand resting protectively over her belly. Harry beaming at her side. But if Meghan truly wasn't carrying Archie, then every one of those moments was staged. Every appearance, every bump-cradling pose, every smile, was part of a grand illusion. And here's the part that should make you pause. This wasn't just a celebrity couple enjoying their spotlight. This was the British monarchy, a 1,000-year-old institution, actively endorsing and presenting this image to the world. If it wasn't real, then the deception wasn't Meghan's alone. It was a palace-sanctioned performance. Why would they risk everything? Why would the royals, who live and die by tradition, cover up something so explosive? Let's linger on that question. Because there are only a few possible answers. Either Meghan truly was pregnant, and the speculation is unfounded. Or she wasn't, and the palace decided the world could never know. Both scenarios carry massive implications. If she was, then why so much secrecy around Archie's birth? If she wasn't, then who made the decision to keep up the charade? Harry? Meghan? Charles? The Queen herself? And here's where things get darker. By the time Meghan's pregnancy was announced, the royal family was still reeling from scandals. Prince Andrew's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, the lingering shadows of Diana's tragic death, the growing pressures of modern media. The monarchy needed good press. They needed a shining, untouchable story. And Meghan's pregnancy provided it. The mixed-race Duchess, the Hollywood actress turned royal, carrying the first modern royal baby of a new era. It was perfect. Too perfect. But perfection rarely tells the whole story. Have you ever noticed how quickly the palace shut down questions about Meghan's pregnancy? When tabloids speculated about her bump, palace spokespeople dismissed it as cruel gossip. When conspiracy theories gained traction online, mainstream outlets rushed to discredit them. And when Meghan herself was asked about motherhood, she gave vague, scripted answers, often pivoting to other topics. Why avoid transparency if there's nothing to hide? That's the key. With Kate Middleton, we saw 3 highly publicized pregnancies. Photos outside the hospital, smiling, holding newborns for the world to see. Tradition upheld, transparency maintained. But with Meghan, the story played out differently. No hospital photo, no public view of the newborn. Just staged photos, released under carefully controlled conditions. And let's not forget, the birth certificate itself became a point of confusion. At first, Meghan's name was listed in full. Later, it was mysteriously altered to Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Why change such a basic detail? Was it a clerical decision, or a deliberate attempt to control the narrative? These oddities matter. Each one on its own could be brushed off. But together, they paint a picture of secrecy, of manipulation, of something bigger brewing beneath the surface. And this brings us back to the most chilling possibility of all, that Meghan never carried Archie. That another woman, unknown to the public, was the real mother. That Archie's birth was orchestrated, staged, hidden from the world in a way that would shock even the most loyal royal supporters. If true, that would explain the secrecy, the missing traditions, the inconsistencies in Meghan's public appearances, the palace's defensiveness. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. Dr. Moda, who has now publicly claimed Meghan never carried Archie, insists there was a surrogate. Not a rumor, not speculation, a surrogate. If that's true, then the palace has been sitting on one of the greatest cover-ups in modern royal history. And the implications are massive, not just for Meghan and Harry, but for Archie himself. Because if Archie was born via surrogate, why was that fact hidden? Was it to protect privacy? Or to protect the image of the monarchy? And what does it mean for Archie's place in the line of succession, if the truth were ever to come out? Let's not forget, royal succession is no small matter. It's the backbone of the monarchy. Rules, laws, centuries of tradition determine who inherits the throne. And if Archie's birth didn't follow those rules, then what? It's a question the palace has never dared to answer. So as we peel back the layers of this scandal, remember this. Every fairy tale has a dark side. Every polished story has hidden cracks. And sometimes, the truth is so shocking, so dangerous, that those in power will do anything to keep it buried. But what if the truth is already out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to connect the dots? Because as you're about to see, the story of Meghan's pregnancy is riddled with contradictions, mysteries, and secrets the palace hoped would never see the light of day. And yet, here we are. Which brings us to the first piece of the puzzle, the fairy tale announcement itself. The moment the world was told Meghan was pregnant, and the subtle signs that something wasn't right from the very start. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The world remembers the moment vividly. October 2018, a crisp autumn day, and suddenly the headlines were everywhere. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are expecting. For millions around the globe, it was a storybook moment. A modern fairy tale unfolding in real time. Meghan Markle, the Hollywood actress who had captured Prince Harry's heart, was pregnant. The monarchy had a new hope. The public was ecstatic. Social media exploded. Newspapers featured glowing photos of the couple smiling, holding hands, basking in a moment that seemed destined to be etched in history. But as with every story that feels too perfect, the closer you look, the more anomalies you notice. The first question that struck many observers wasn't one of celebration, but of skepticism. Was it real, or just a carefully constructed narrative? Think about the announcement itself. Meghan and Harry were on tour in Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, and Fiji, a whirlwind of public appearances, charity events, and royal engagements. The palace timed the pregnancy news to coincide with this tour. Strategically, it was brilliant. Cameras were already trained on the couple, journalists already primed to write glowing features. The news would hit instantly, ensuring maximum global coverage. But for some, the timing was almost too calculated. Was this a coincidence, or a sign that the palace had orchestrated a narrative designed for impact rather than authenticity? The images of Meghan that followed were scrutinized relentlessly. Each dress she wore, each public gesture, each subtle touch of her belly was analyzed in the tabloids, on social media, and even in casual conversation. And that's where cracks began to appear. Observers noticed inconsistencies in the size and shape of her bump. One day it appeared compact and neatly rounded. Another day, it seemed almost balloon-like, as if it had shifted unnaturally under the fabric of her designer outfits. These were subtle differences, often dismissed as wardrobe quirks or photographic illusion, but the repetition raised eyebrows. How could a pregnancy bump change so dramatically in such short periods? The palace's response to these murmurs was swift. Official statements labeled any speculation as cruel and unfounded gossip. The couple's publicists encouraged the media to focus on Meghan's glow, her fashion, and the couple's excitement, rather than the naysayers questioning the authenticity of the pregnancy. Yet the more the palace tried to suppress the whispers, the louder they grew. In an age of social media and instant analysis, controlling the narrative became almost impossible. Now, consider Meghan's behavior during this period. She maintained a tightly controlled image, smiling, poised, and always carefully photographed. Yet, even in this controlled environment, there were moments that hinted at something unusual. During public appearances, Meghan occasionally bent or adjusted her clothing in ways that drew attention to the belly, but in subtle, almost theatrical ways. Her hand placement often seemed deliberate, sculpted to create the illusion of a perfect pregnancy curve. Observers and digital sleuths began comparing appearances over time, noting discrepancies that suggested the possibility of fabrication. Then there was the timing of announcements within the tour itself. While the couple appeared to be sharing joyous news spontaneously with the public, insiders pointed out that such announcements are never spontaneous in royal life. They are meticulously planned. Was it possible that the announcement was designed not merely to share news, but to shape public perception, distract from other palace controversies, or control the media's focus? Beyond the visuals and timing, the cultural and historical context adds another layer of intrigue. The British monarchy is steeped in tradition, with births, marriages, and ceremonies carefully documented and celebrated. Every royal pregnancy is a public event, laden with symbolism and pageantry. Yet Meghan's pregnancy broke from tradition in subtle ways. There were no early, staged maternity photos like those of Kate Middleton. The Duchess appeared on public engagements almost immediately, in outfits that concealed any definitive proof of gestation, while the palace tightly controlled access to her private life. This deviation from tradition raised questions. Why was a pregnancy, typically so celebrated and scrutinized, being treated with such secrecy? Public fascination only intensified when Meghan and Harry returned from their tour. The media was eager to capture the first photos of the Duchess's bump in England, yet the palace ensured access remained limited. Paparazzi caught glimpses, but the images often seemed inconsistent. One day the bump appeared prominent, the next day barely noticeable. Such inconsistencies fueled speculation. Were these mere coincidences, artifacts of camera angles and clothing? Or were they pieces of a larger puzzle, carefully manipulated to create a story that was never entirely real? Let's pause and consider the psychological dimension. For millions, the pregnancy was a symbol of hope, modernization, and inclusivity within the monarchy. Meghan, a biracial woman and a former actress, represented a new chapter for a centuries-old institution. Her pregnancy symbolized continuity, joy, and the merging of royal tradition with modern celebrity culture. Questioning the authenticity of that narrative, however, challenges not just Meghan and Harry, but the public's sense of belief in a fairy tale brought to life. The stakes were emotional as much as factual. And then there's the question of secrecy. No royal pregnancy has been so tightly controlled. No announcements so strategically placed. No appearances so carefully choreographed. Each detail seemed calculated to reinforce the story while limiting opportunities for independent verification. The pattern is unmistakable. Perfect timing, perfect photos, perfect public conduct. And yet, even with all that perfection, the world's attention to detail allowed doubts to surface. One of the most striking aspects of this period was the contrast with previous royal pregnancies. Princess Diana's maternity was widely celebrated, with early public sightings, photos on the steps of the hospital, and open media access. Kate Middleton followed a similar pattern, with staged photo ops that delighted the press and public alike. Meghan's approach, or perhaps the palace's approach to managing her pregnancy, was markedly different. There were no hospital steps photos, no immediate media access, and an air of controlled secrecy surrounded every public appearance. Why did the palace choose this path? There are multiple possibilities. Perhaps it was to protect Meghan's privacy. Perhaps it was to control media narratives amid an increasingly hostile press environment. Perhaps, and this is where speculation intensifies, there was something to hide. If there were irregularities in the pregnancy, or even the possibility of a surrogate, then secrecy would have been essential. The monarchy, an institution built on image and public perception, could not risk the truth being exposed prematurely. And now we arrive at the moment where everything begins to intersect. Dr. Moda's claims, surfacing years later, challenged the entire narrative. According to him, Meghan never carried Archie. The implications are staggering. If a surrogate was indeed used, then the perfectly orchestrated public appearances, the timing of the announcements, and the carefully managed images were not merely strategic. They were essential to maintaining a deception. Every detail mattered. Every public appearance was part of a script. This chapter of the story is not just about appearances. It's about narrative control, public perception, and the lengths to which the monarchy will go to maintain an image of perfection. Every seemingly innocent photograph, every strategic announcement, every pose on the world stage could now be reevaluated under the lens of potential fabrication. And yet, despite the growing suspicions, the world continued to buy the narrative. Few dared to question it publicly. The fairy tale was too appealing. Meghan was too beloved. The image of the Duke and Duchess, glowing with anticipation, was exactly what the monarchy needed. But fairy tales, as we all know, are rarely as simple as they appear. Beneath the surface, the undercurrents of doubt, inconsistency, and secrecy were already converging, setting the stage for revelations that would shock the public and potentially shake the monarchy itself. And just when it seemed that the world had accepted the narrative, subtle anomalies began to draw scrutiny, from the way Meghan carried herself, to discrepancies in photos, to the absence of traditional birth announcements. These were not isolated events, but a pattern that, when pieced together, suggests a story far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The fairy tale announcement, which seemed so perfect at first glance, was only the beginning. It set in motion a chain of events, observations, and questions that would not only challenge Meghan's narrative, but also raise doubts about the palace's involvement. Every carefully staged appearance, every photo, every press statement now appears in a new light, one that suggests not everything was as it seemed. And yet, the world remained largely oblivious, mesmerized by the glow of the story, unaware that beneath it lay a mystery of potentially historic proportions. But what came next, the so-called mysterious baby bump, would escalate the intrigue and bring the first major questions to the forefront. When Meghan Markle's pregnancy first became public, millions around the world were enchanted. The Duchess's glowing appearance, her elegant dresses, and the poised way she cradled her belly created an image of perfection that seemed almost unreal. But as months passed and the couple continued their public engagements, something began to catch the eye of keen observers: the baby bump. Or, more accurately, the inconsistencies surrounding it. It started subtly. Photographs taken on different days, sometimes even just hours apart, suggested that Meghan's bump wasn't behaving in the way a normal pregnancy bump should. In some photos, it appeared small, compact, and firmly rounded. In others, it seemed to protrude more dramatically, almost ballooning under the fabric of her clothing. To casual onlookers, these differences might seem trivial, but for those who closely follow royal pregnancies and scrutinize the minute details, the shifts raised immediate questions. Have you ever compared her appearances side by side? It's hard to ignore. One day, Meghan was photographed attending a charity event, her hand resting delicately on her bump, the curvature subtle and realistic. Yet at another engagement just days later, the bump appeared larger, sitting higher, with fabric stretched in ways that suggested it was not a natural swell, but something being carefully positioned. The shifts were minor, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but repeated observations revealed a pattern. The bump didn't grow steadily in a natural progression, as would be expected with a normal pregnancy. Let's break down some of these moments. During a public appearance in late 2018, Meghan wore a fitted dress that clung to her midsection. The lighting, the folds of the fabric, and the angle of the photo all created a perfectly rounded silhouette. Observers noted that it looked almost artificial, like a subtle prop placed beneath her clothing to give the appearance of pregnancy. Days later, she appeared in a looser coat, walking briskly with Prince Harry. This time, the bump seemed smaller, almost disappearing in comparison to the earlier photo. The contrast was stark. The discrepancies fueled rumors online. Social media detectives, armed with photographic comparisons, began pointing out what they called the shape-shifting bump. Some suggested it was padding. Others speculated about a moon bump, a term used in celebrity circles when a pregnancy is simulated with clothing enhancements rather than actual gestation. Meanwhile, the palace and mainstream media dismissed such claims as trivial or malicious. "The Duchess is glowing," they said. "She's healthy and radiant." But no one offered a clear explanation for the inconsistencies. The effect of these visual anomalies was compounded by Meghan's controlled public behavior. She often used her hands strategically, positioning them in ways that obscured certain angles of her midsection. When sitting, she occasionally crossed her legs or leaned forward, subtly concealing the bump from photographers. When standing, she would angle herself toward Harry, further limiting clear views. To casual observers, these gestures seemed natural, even graceful. But for those scrutinizing the possibility of a staged pregnancy, the consistency of these movements raised eyebrows. Consider also the clothing choices. Meghan favored dresses with intricate folds, draping, and high-quality fabric, perfect for masking details or manipulating the visual perception of her body. She frequently chose styles that created the illusion of volume around the midsection, allowing for a bump that could appear larger or smaller depending on the angle. Fashion experts noted that such techniques are common in Hollywood for actresses who want to simulate pregnancy. Could it be that Meghan, with her acting background, was employing similar methods? Then there were the medical appointments. Or rather, the lack of publicly confirmed appointments. Traditional royal pregnancies often feature press coverage of prenatal visits or ultrasound images, with careful coordination between the palace and media. Meghan's pregnancy, by contrast, was shrouded in secrecy. The public saw little evidence of routine checkups or hospital visits. The limited official information only fueled speculation that something was being hidden. If the baby was real, why conceal even these minor details? If the baby was not biologically hers, the secrecy suddenly made sense. It's important to note that pregnancy is highly individual. Every woman experiences different bump growth patterns, and photographic inconsistencies can easily be explained by lighting, clothing, or posture. Yet in Meghan's case, the anomalies were consistent enough to generate widespread attention. Every public appearance, every photo op, became an opportunity for comparison. Observers began compiling timelines, looking at how the bump appeared over weeks and months, and noting the irregularities. For many, the data suggested a pattern inconsistent with a typical pregnancy. Beyond the visual evidence, behavioral clues added another layer of mystery. Meghan's interactions with staff, her movement during engagements, and her avoidance of certain poses all hinted at a meticulous effort to control perception. At times, she appeared unusually cautious, glancing around before adjusting her dress or touching her bump. Such behaviors, when examined alongside photographic inconsistencies, painted a picture of someone actively managing a narrative. Now, let's talk about the media's role. The tabloids, celebrity blogs, and social media platforms were filled with speculation. Some dismissed it as mean-spirited gossip. Others embraced the theory of a surrogate. Digital analysts began comparing Meghan's clothing, posture, and even the shadows in photos to predict whether a real pregnancy was present. Hashtags questioning the authenticity of her pregnancy trended repeatedly. Yet, despite mounting speculation, mainstream outlets largely avoided covering the anomalies, leaving the public with a sense that the narrative was being carefully curated. What's striking about the mysterious baby bump is how it intersected with timing and geography. During the tour, Meghan's appearances were tightly scheduled, leaving little room for spontaneous observation. The palace controlled every press interaction. At events where the bump could be clearly seen, photographers were often positioned at strategic angles. When media tried to capture candid moments, the images were inconsistent with prior official photos. It was as if the narrative was being rehearsed with precision that only someone deeply familiar with media staging could execute. And here is where the curiosity gap deepens. If the bump was natural, why was there such meticulous attention to positioning, lighting, and presentation? If the bump was artificial, then the stage was set for something far more shocking, the possibility of a surrogate. Every carefully orchestrated public appearance, every strategic hand placement, every flowing dress suddenly takes on a new meaning. Then there's the psychological angle. The public's perception was intentionally guided toward awe, admiration, and belief in the authenticity of the pregnancy. Meghan's acting background, her poise, and her media training made her the perfect vessel for this narrative. Every smile, every gesture, every angle was rehearsed, consciously or unconsciously, to reinforce the story of a glowing duchess expecting her first child. But if the visual inconsistencies were intentional, or at least carefully managed, they weren't just minor details. They were part of a broader strategy to maintain the illusion, to control perception, and to prevent the truth from leaking out. The mysterious bump became both a symbol and a tool, a symbol of Meghan's perfect pregnancy narrative, and a tool for concealing whatever the palace, Meghan, and perhaps even Harry wished to keep secret. And here's where the drama escalates. The more the public and media focused on Meghan's bump, the tighter the palace tightened control over appearances. Every photo op was scrutinized, every angle considered, every gesture rehearsed. This was no longer just a pregnancy, it was a performance. A highly calculated, meticulously staged performance designed to reinforce belief in a narrative that, according to Dr. Moda's later revelations, might not have been true at all. So we return to the question that started this chapter. Was the bump real, or was it carefully crafted? Was Meghan genuinely expecting Archie, or was someone else carrying him in total secrecy? The answer, if true, would explain the inconsistencies, the secrecy, and the precise management of her public appearances. And yet, the world remained largely mesmerized by the fairy tale. Most accepted what they were shown at face value. Few dared to look deeper. But for those who did, the anomalies of the mysterious baby bump were impossible to ignore. Every photo, every appearance, every public moment began to tell a story that was quietly, subtly at odds with the official narrative. And just when speculation was reaching a fever pitch, the next chapter of this drama emerged, the vanishing birth records. Because if there was ever a piece of evidence that could settle the mystery, it would be the official documentation. But, as we will see, those records added fuel to the fire rather than clarity. Every royal birth in history is an event meticulously documented. From Queen Elizabeth II to Prince William and Kate Middleton, every detail, from the hospital of birth to the timing and official announcements, is recorded with precision. The public is invited into the ritual of witnessing a new heir, if only through carefully curated photos and statements. And yet, when it came to Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor, something unusual happened. The records appeared different. They were, in a word, vanishing. At first glance, the information was sparse. The palace released a statement confirming the birth, the time, and the hospital. But unlike previous royal births, where press photographers captured the iconic steps of the Lindo wing at St. Mary's Hospital in London, with proud parents holding their newborn for the cameras, Archie's debut was almost entirely obscured. No widely circulated photographs of Meghan exiting the hospital, no immediate public appearances. Just staged photos, chosen carefully by the palace, released days after the fact. It was unusual, extremely unusual. The first hint that something might be amiss came when journalists attempted to obtain details from the hospital itself. The administration at the Lindo wing was silent, citing patient privacy. But so far, every royal birth has been accompanied by at least some transparency. Diana, Charles, Kate, all of them had at least minimal confirmation from the hospital. Why was Archie's birth treated differently? The question lingered. Was this mere discretion, or a sign of something more clandestine? And then came the birth certificate. Initially, the document listed Archie's parents' names, his date of birth, and his full titles, as expected. Yet over time, subtle discrepancies emerged. The way his mother's name was recorded shifted from Meghan Markle to Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. To most, this seemed minor, a clerical correction. But for observers scrutinizing every detail of this birth, it raised a red flag. Why modify the basic information of a royal newborn, unless the change served a specific purpose? Was it an attempt to obscure biological parentage? Social media quickly picked up on this anomaly. Online forums and investigative blogs began comparing Archie's records to those of previous royal children. Patterns were inconsistent. Certain details that should have been public were missing, while other details seemed to have been sanitized. The lack of hospital photographs, the limited access to official statements, and the adjustments to the birth certificate combined to create a situation unlike any modern royal birth. Consider also the timeline of announcements. The birth itself was confirmed late at night, with minimal fanfare. No live coverage, no media frenzy. In previous instances, the palace strategically timed announcements, but always allowed the press a window to capture and broadcast images. With Archie, the gap between birth and public knowledge seemed deliberately elongated. The longer the delay, the more control the palace maintained over the narrative, and the more questions it raised. Whispers began to circulate online almost immediately. Some speculated that the palace wanted to avoid revealing certain medical details. Others suggested that the delay was orchestrated to allow for alternative preparations, a surrogate birth, perhaps, or a controlled media narrative. Bloggers compared timelines, pointing out contradictions in photos, press releases, and public appearances. Every inconsistency was analyzed, every unexplained detail magnified. Then there were the insiders. Former royal staff, anonymous sources with knowledge of palace operations, began hinting that Archie's birth was shrouded in secrecy. Some suggested that the palace had anticipated intense media scrutiny and wanted to maintain an airtight narrative. Others, more provocatively, whispered about the possibility of surrogacy. These claims were never confirmed officially, but they added weight to the growing suspicion that something extraordinary was being concealed. Even in public appearances after the birth, anomalies continued. Archie was not shown in the same manner as previous royal children. Unlike Prince George and Princess Charlotte, whose early photos featured smiling parents on the hospital steps, Archie's first glimpses came from staged photos at carefully controlled angles, often with the infant swaddled in blankets that obscured key details. It was as if every opportunity for independent verification had been systematically removed. And then, years later, Dr. Moda's claims reignited the debate. According to him, Meghan never carried Archie. The child was born via surrogate. Suddenly, every detail that had seemed unusual, the delayed announcements, the modified birth certificate, the absence of hospital photographs, began to make sense. If a surrogate was involved, controlling the timeline, the images, and the official records would have been essential. Any deviation could have revealed the truth prematurely, undermining both the palace and Meghan's carefully constructed public image. Think about the implications for a moment. If Archie's birth was indeed orchestrated in secret, with the palace complicit, this was no minor deception. It was a carefully managed operation, designed to maintain the appearance of tradition while concealing a fundamental fact. Every staged photo, every delayed press release, every alteration to official documents could be seen as part of a strategy to protect the illusion. And yet, despite these irregularities, the public largely accepted the narrative at face value. The image of a happy couple, glowing with excitement over their newborn, was compelling. Few dared to question it openly. But in private, among online communities, investigative blogs, and whispers in the media, the anomalies of Archie's birth became fodder for speculation. Was the palace hiding a simple privacy issue, or was something more extraordinary occurring behind closed doors? The vanishing birth records also intersected with broader questions about royal transparency. The monarchy has always operated under intense public scrutiny, yet in Archie's case, the mechanisms for public oversight appeared intentionally muted. No independent verification, no press access, no early photographs. just a carefully curated set of images and statements released on the palace's terms. The contrast with previous royal births was stark and undeniable. And then there were the questions about succession and legitimacy. In the British monarchy, lineage is everything. Any ambiguity regarding a child's parentage is not merely a personal matter. It carries profound legal and symbolic implications. If Archie's biological origins were different from the public narrative, it could potentially challenge the assumptions underpinning the royal succession. Even if only symbolically, it cast a shadow over one of the monarchy's most fundamental principles. It's this tension, the interplay between secrecy, narrative control, and public perception, that makes the vanishing birth records so critical. They are not just bureaucratic details. They are the foundation upon which the story of Archie's birth rests. And when those details are incomplete, altered, or intentionally obscured, suspicion naturally follows. By the end of 2018, the mystery had deepened. The world celebrated Archie's arrival, charmed by the fairy tale, while keen observers and insiders began to note inconsistencies, omissions, and anomalies. The carefully staged narrative had succeeded in capturing public imagination, but the cracks were beginning to show. The vanishing birth records, combined with the inconsistent bump and delayed announcements, set the stage for a revelation that would shake perceptions of the monarchy and the story of Meghan Markle's pregnancy forever. And just when it seemed that the mystery could not deepen further, Dr. Moda entered the conversation. His explosive claim that Meghan never carried Archie and that a surrogate was involved cast a new light on the entire sequence of events. Every delayed announcement, every altered record, every staged photo suddenly gained a chilling new significance. The vanishing birth records were not merely a curiosity. They were a crucial piece of the puzzle, a silent testimony to the extraordinary lengths taken to control perception and protect secrecy. But the story does not end there. Because to understand why this level of secrecy was deemed necessary, we need to examine the person at the center of it all, Dr. Moda, whose claims would ignite a firestorm and challenge everything the world thought it knew about Meghan Markle's pregnancy. In the quiet corridors of medical circles, few names generate as much intrigue as Dr. Moda. Not a household name to the average royal watcher, but within the networks of private physicians, fertility experts, and high-profile medical advisors, his reputation is formidable. That reputation became public when he made a claim that would shake the foundations of the royal narrative. Meghan Markle never carried Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor. The assertion is bold, controversial, explosive. Dr. Moda didn't couch it in speculation. He stated it as fact, citing medical insight and his understanding of surrogacy practices in high-profile, high-security scenarios. His claim wasn't just about Meghan's personal choices. It implicated the palace itself in orchestrating a cover-up, a strategic deception designed to preserve both royal image and the public's trust in the institution. Let's dissect why this claim is so monumental. First, consider the individual making it. Dr. Moda is not a gossip columnist or an anonymous source on the internet. He is a medical professional with direct experience in reproductive medicine, fertility procedures, and the logistics of surrogacy. While he has not provided exhaustive proof to the public, because of patient confidentiality and legal constraints, his insight draws on patterns, practices, and knowledge that are highly credible. The claim alone is enough to ignite a firestorm, but when placed alongside the inconsistencies in Meghan's pregnancy, the shifting bump, the staged appearances, the vanishing birth records, it gains a context that is almost impossible to ignore. Dr. Moda's statement suggests a scenario in which the pregnancy narrative was entirely constructed. Every public appearance, every maternity photo, every staged event may have been a performance designed to convince the world of a reality that never existed. Why would such a scenario be necessary? The answer lies at the intersection of power, perception, and protection. The British monarchy thrives on narrative control. Every scandal, every slip, every deviation from expectation is a potential threat to its carefully curated image. A pregnancy, particularly one as high-profile as Meghan Markle's, is not just a personal milestone. It's a public event, scrutinized by millions and immortalized in media. If there were irregularities, medical, logistical, or otherwise, the palace would have every incentive to manage perception meticulously. Dr. Moda's claim directly addresses the elephant in the room, the possibility of a surrogate. If Archie was born via a surrogate, then the entire public narrative, from the first announcement to the debut photos, required careful orchestration. Every delay, every anomaly, every stage-managed appearance takes on new meaning. It's no longer a question of style, wardrobe, or photographic illusion. It's a strategic effort to maintain secrecy. Consider the practicalities. Surrogacy at the level implied by Dr. Moda's claim would require not only medical precision, but also logistical coordination. Timing the birth, ensuring confidentiality, managing hospital access, and orchestrating public appearances would demand the participation, or at least the acquiescence, of palace officials. It would necessitate legal safeguards, strict non-disclosure agreements, and a carefully constructed timeline. In short, it would be a massive undertaking, one the monarchy would not embark upon lightly. The implications for Meghan Markle herself are profound. If she never carried Archie, then the narrative of her pregnancy, her public appearances, the bump, the carefully managed events, was part of a performance that may have involved complex psychological and social pressures. Was she complicit? Was she protecting privacy? Or was she acting under palace guidance to maintain an image for both herself and her family? These questions remain open, but they underscore the dramatic weight of Dr. Moda's claim. Public reaction to the claim has been intense. Social media erupted with speculation, conspiracy theories, and heated debates. Supporters of Meghan denounced it as an unfounded attack, questioning Dr. Moda's motives and credibility. Critics, however, seized upon it as confirmation of their long-held suspicions regarding inconsistencies in the pregnancy narrative. The claim has become a flashpoint, dividing opinion and forcing the public to reconsider what they believed about the royal family's most closely watched pregnancy in decades. Yet the controversy extends beyond personal reputations. It touches on institutional credibility, the trustworthiness of official narratives, and the lengths to which a centuries-old monarchy will go to preserve its image. If Dr. Moda's claim is accurate, then the palace has orchestrated a level of secrecy unprecedented in modern royal history. It would suggest that public perception was managed through staged appearances, selective disclosures, and controlled media access, a concerted effort to prevent a truth from reaching the world. Moreover, the claim raises ethical questions. Surrogacy is a deeply personal and often legally complex process. If a surrogate was used in secret, the ethical dimensions multiply. The surrogate's anonymity, the child's understanding of their own origins, and the public's right to transparency all become entangled in a web of secrecy. For a public institution like the monarchy, which relies on trust and tradition, the ramifications are profound. And then there's the timing of Dr. Moda's disclosure. Years after Archie's birth, when Meghan and Harry had already left their senior royal roles, the claim surfaces, reigniting scrutiny. Why now? The timing amplifies the impact. By revealing this information when the couple is no longer bound by the same level of institutional oversight, Dr. Moda ensured that the claim could not be dismissed as mere rumor. It forces a re-evaluation of events that have long been considered settled. Dr. Moda's assertion also intersects with the curious anomalies noted during Meghan's pregnancy. The shifting bump, the limited public appearances, the delayed birth announcements, and the vanishing birth records. Each of these elements, taken individually, might be explainable, but together, they form a pattern that aligns uncannily with the claim that a surrogate was used. The consistency of the anomalies lends credibility to the idea that the public narrative was meticulously managed. Of course, skepticism is natural. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Dr. Moda's insights, while compelling, cannot be independently verified by the public due to confidentiality and privacy laws. Yet, even without concrete proof, the claim has forced a re-examination of previously accepted facts. It has challenged the public to look beyond appearances, to question the curated images and narratives presented by the palace, and to consider the possibility that the story of Archie's birth is far more complex than previously believed. The weight of this revelation also places Harry in a difficult position. Throughout the pregnancy and birth, he maintained a public demeanor of pride, protection, and support for Meghan. If a surrogate was involved, and if the palace was aware, what role did Harry play in managing this secrecy? Was he complicit, supportive, or simply a participant in a broader narrative he could not fully control? These questions add a layer of human drama to the unfolding scandal, highlighting the tension between personal loyalty and institutional expectation. And perhaps most importantly, Dr. Moda's claim forces the public to confront the implications for Archie himself. The child, born into a world of scrutiny and expectation, may have origins that differ from the official narrative. How will this knowledge, if confirmed, affect his understanding of identity, heritage, and family? How does a monarchy, steeped in tradition, reconcile the possibility of a birth that deviates from its historical norms? As we consider these questions, one fact becomes clear. Dr. Moda's claim is not just about Meghan Markle or the Duchess's pregnancy. It is about transparency, perception, and the lengths to which powerful institutions will go to preserve an image. It is about how narratives are constructed, maintained, and, when necessary, challenged. And just when it seems the claim could not be more shocking, the next piece of the puzzle emerges: the mechanics of the surrogate theory itself. Who could have carried Archie? How was the process managed in total secrecy? And what does it reveal about the palace's involvement and the orchestration of public appearances? Imagine this. Behind the polished photos, the staged appearances, and the carefully controlled media narrative, there may have been another person entirely. Someone who carried Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor in total secrecy. According to Dr. Moda's explosive claims, Meghan Markle never experienced the physical pregnancy herself. Instead, a surrogate, a woman acting under confidentiality agreements, legal protections, and likely palace oversight, bore the royal child. At first glance, the concept of surrogacy within the royal family might seem almost impossible. The monarchy is steeped in centuries of tradition. Every birth is not just personal, but deeply symbolic. Yet, consider the pressures Meghan faced. A high-profile biracial woman marrying into one of the most scrutinized families in the world, subjected to intense media attention, paparazzi intrusion, and relentless public judgment. The stress alone of carrying a child under those conditions could be considered extreme, even perilous. In this context, surrogacy is not just plausible. It might have been seen as a practical, protective option. Let's examine how such a scenario could have worked. First, surrogacy at this level is a complex logistical endeavor. It requires medical precision, legal safeguards, and absolute secrecy. The surrogate would have been selected through a private network, likely under the guidance of experienced reproductive specialists. Non-disclosure agreements would be standard, ensuring that no one outside a tight circle of palace officials, medical professionals, and the couple themselves could reveal the truth. The pregnancy would need to align perfectly with public appearances and the carefully constructed narrative of Meghan's gestation. Every photo, every event, every gesture would need to maintain the illusion that Meghan herself was carrying Archie. Clothing choices, draping, and hand placement would be orchestrated to mask inconsistencies in the bump's size and position. Timing was critical. Ultrasound schedules, prenatal checkups, and even the birth itself would be managed with precision to avoid leaks. Consider the public appearances during Meghan's pregnancy. She attended numerous charity events, international tours, and high-profile engagements. Observers noted the shifting shape of her bump, her strategic hand placements, and subtle movements designed to obscure angles. Viewed in the light of a surrogate pregnancy, these behaviors take on a new meaning. They were not mere stylistic choices or unconscious habits. They may have been deliberate efforts to maintain the illusion of a natural pregnancy. The secrecy surrounding the birth itself is also consistent with a surrogacy theory. The absence of traditional hospital photographs, the delayed press announcements, and the controlled release of images all point to extraordinary caution. If a surrogate was used, controlling every public and media-facing detail would have been essential. Even minor deviations could have led to exposure, scandal, and questions about legitimacy. Now, consider the palace's role. If a surrogate pregnancy occurred, it's unlikely the couple acted entirely independently. The monarchy has a vested interest in the perception of lineage and legitimacy. Palace officials would need to approve every detail, from the selection of the surrogate to the timing of appearances and announcements. This implies a level of coordination and secrecy that is almost unprecedented in modern royal history. Every decision would be carefully weighed against public perception, tradition, and potential fallout. The surrogate theory also raises questions about Meghan's motivations. Why would she choose or agree to a surrogate? Protection of privacy is one factor, but there may be others. Health concerns, previous experiences, or a desire to shield Archie from the relentless spotlight of royal scrutiny from the moment of conception. Such considerations, while deeply personal, intersect with the public narrative in ways that amplify the stakes and potential consequences of exposure. From a logistical standpoint, surrogacy is entirely feasible. Advanced reproductive technologies make it possible for an embryo created from Meghan and Harry's gametes to be implanted in a surrogate. Medical professionals can ensure proper timing, prenatal development, and eventual birth, all under strict confidentiality. High-profile families, including celebrities, have utilized these methods for decades, often without public knowledge. The royal family, with its resources and network of trusted professionals, would have access to the highest levels of medical expertise and discretion. Yet, surrogacy introduces complexities beyond logistics. Ethical considerations, psychological impacts, and legal frameworks all come into play. The surrogate's anonymity must be maintained, the child's origins must be understood and protected, and the public's perception managed meticulously. In the context of the monarchy, these factors are magnified by the institution's centuries-long emphasis on legitimacy, lineage, and tradition. Any leak or misstep could have enormous repercussions, potentially undermining both the family and the institution itself. Public reactions, had the surrogacy been disclosed at the time, might have been mixed. Some would view it as a practical solution to an extraordinary set of pressures. Others, particularly traditionalists and royalists, might perceive it as a breach of royal protocol and an unsettling deviation from centuries of precedent. The monarchy, understanding these dynamics, would have had strong incentive to maintain secrecy until the child reached a certain age, or, in the case of Dr. Moda's revelations, indefinitely. It's also worth noting that surrogacy is not inherently controversial in medical or ethical terms. It is, however, highly sensitive when tied to public figures, particularly in an institution like the British monarchy. The stakes are enormous. Maintaining the illusion of a natural pregnancy would require careful coordination, trust, and absolute discretion. From hand placement to fabric draping, from timing public appearances to controlling media narratives, every detail would contribute to the successful concealment of the surrogate's role. And then there's the question of disclosure. When Dr. Moda came forward, he did so cautiously, aware of the potential legal and ethical consequences. He did not reveal the identity of the surrogate, the specific methods used, or private medical details. He simply asserted, based on his expertise, that Meghan did not carry Archie. This approach ensured that the focus remained on the plausibility and implications of surrogacy, rather than personal attacks or violations of privacy. If we connect the dots, the shifting bump, the absence of traditional announcements, the controlled public appearances, the vanishing birth records, the surrogate theory provides a compelling explanation. Each anomaly, previously seen in isolation, forms part of a cohesive narrative when viewed through this lens. The public-facing pregnancy was a performance. The real gestation occurred behind closed doors, shielded from the world's gaze. And yet, the most astonishing part is how seamlessly the narrative was maintained. For months, Meghan and Harry presented a picture-perfect pregnancy. The public believed. Media outlets reported. The monarchy remained poised. And only now, through the careful revelation of insiders and experts like Dr. Moda, does the full picture emerge. one of meticulous planning, extraordinary secrecy, and perhaps a royal first in modern history. But as compelling as the surrogate theory is, it leads to even more questions. Who oversaw the medical process? How did the palace coordinate the logistics? And what were Meghan's personal experiences during this period? Was she fully aware of every step or guided by advisors and institutional pressures? These questions set the stage for examining Meghan's public behavior during the pregnancy, which often raised subtle but telling signals that something was being concealed. The surrogate theory is not just a medical or logistical hypothesis. It is a window into the extraordinary lengths taken to manage perception, protect privacy, and maintain the image of royal continuity. Every gesture, every dress, every photo op suddenly makes sense in a way that is both fascinating and unsettling. And just when it seems that the story of the surrogate could not become more intricate, we turn to the public appearances that sparked confusion, speculation, and intense scrutiny. Meghan's odd movements, strategic poses, and seemingly calculated behaviors that masked what might have been the greatest secret in modern royal history. From the very beginning of Meghan Markle's pregnancy, keen observers couldn't help but notice that something seemed off. Not in a glaring, obvious way, nothing that would stop the casual observer from buying into the fairy tale, but in subtle, almost imperceptible ways that, when pieced together, painted a picture of calculated orchestration. Every movement, every pose, every gesture seemed deliberate, as if choreographed to maintain an illusion that, according to Dr. Moda's claim, was not rooted in reality. Take, for example, her posture during official appearances. Meghan frequently positioned herself in ways that obscured the view of her midsection, standing slightly behind Harry, angling her body to the side, or crossing her legs while walking. These seemingly casual adjustments were repeated across multiple engagements. The effect? Observers couldn't get a consistent, clear view of her belly. To the casual eye, it might have seemed natural or graceful. But for those tracking the pregnancy closely, patterns emerged. The Duchess was always careful to control what could be seen. Hand placement became another subtle tool. Meghan's hands rested lightly over her bump in almost every appearance, often in ways that emphasized volume in some photos and minimized it in others. Onlookers noted the near-perfect symmetry. Hand positions were almost always just right to mask inconsistencies or create the impression of a consistent pregnancy. In the world of photography and optics, small adjustments can drastically alter perception, and Meghan, with her acting experience and media awareness, knew this instinctively. Then there was the matter of clothing. Meghan favored dresses with flowing fabrics, strategic folds, and draping. High-quality materials, cut to perfection, allowed for slight adjustments to her silhouette, creating the illusion of a bump that could appear larger, smaller, higher, or lower depending on the event and angle. Every appearance was carefully curated to project the narrative of a healthy, natural pregnancy. Some outfits clung subtly, while others allowed the bump to shift in unexpected ways, feeding into the pattern of inconsistency that fueled public curiosity and speculation. Movement during engagements was equally telling. Meghan often bent at the waist, crouched to greet children, or leaned slightly forward when speaking with officials and dignitaries. On the surface, these were normal gestures, signs of engagement and approachability. But when repeated across multiple events and compared with photographic evidence, it became apparent that these movements consistently masked certain angles of the midsection. Every bend, every lean, every shift served a dual purpose, a natural interaction and a subtle concealment. Contrast these behaviors with traditional royal pregnancies. Kate Middleton, for instance, appeared frequently and openly, her bump clearly visible in staged photographs, during public walks, and at press events. Photographers had near unrestricted access. The public saw her pregnancy in full, with only minimal control over angles and timing. Meghan's appearances, by contrast, were always tightly controlled. Photographers were positioned strategically. Events were scripted. Angles and lighting were meticulously considered.